audiobook presents The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoyevsky. Part 1, Book 2, An Unfortunate Gathering. Chapter 1, They Arrive at the Monastery.
It was a warm, bright day at the end of August. The interview with the elder had been fixed for 11:30, immediately after late Mass. Our visitors did not take part in the service, but arrived just as it was over. First, an elegant open carriage, drawn by two valuable horses, drove up with Musov and a distant relative of his, a young man of 20, called Pyotr Fomich Kalganov. This young man was preparing to enter the university. Musov, with whom he was staying for the time, was trying to persuade him to go abroad to the University of Zurich or Jena. The young man was still undecided. He was thoughtful and absent-minded. He was nice-looking, strongly built, and rather tall. There was a strange fixity in his gaze at times. Like all very absent-minded people, he would sometimes stare at a person without seeing him. He was silent and rather awkward, but sometimes when he was alone with anyone, he became talkative and effusive, and would laugh at anything or nothing. But his animation vanished as quickly as it appeared. He was always well and even elaborately dressed. He had already some independent fortune and expectations of much more. He was a friend of Alyosha's. In an ancient, jolting but roomy hired carriage, with a pair of old pinkish-grey horses, a long way behind Musov's carriage, came Fyodor Pavlovich, with his son Ivan. Dmitri was late, though he had been informed of the time the evening before. The visitors left their carriage at the hotel, outside the precinct, and went to the gates of the monastery on foot. Except Fyodor Pavlovich, none of the party had ever seen the monastery, and Musov had probably not even been to church for 30 years. He looked about him with curiosity, together with assumed ease. But except the church and the domestic buildings, though these too were ordinary enough, he found nothing of interest in the interior of the monastery. The last of the worshippers were coming out of the church, bareheaded and crossing themselves. Among the humbler people were a few of higher rank, 2 or 3 ladies and a very old general. They were all staying at the hotel. Our visitors were at once surrounded by beggars, but none of them gave them anything, except young Kalganov, who took a 10-kopeck piece out of his purse, and, nervous and embarrassed, God knows why, hurriedly gave it to an old woman, saying, "Divide it equally." None of his companions made any remark upon it, so that he had no reason to be embarrassed. But, perceiving this, he was even more overcome. It was strange that their arrival did not seem expected, and that they were not received with special honor, though one of them had recently made a donation of 1,000 rubles, while another was a very wealthy and highly cultured landowner, upon whom all in the monastery were in a sense dependent, as the decision of the lawsuit might at any moment put their fishing rights in his hands. Yet no official personage met them. Musov looked absent-mindedly at the tombstones round the church, and was on the point of saying that the dead buried here must have paid a pretty penny for the right of lying in this holy place, but refrained. His liberal irony was rapidly changing almost into anger. "Who the devil is there to ask in this imbecile place? We must find out, for time is passing," he observed suddenly, as though speaking to himself. All at once there came up a bald-headed elderly man with ingratiating little eyes, wearing a full summer overcoat. Lifting his hat, he introduced himself with a honeyed lips as Maximov, a landowner of Tula. He at once entered into our visitor's difficulty. "Father Zosimer lives in the hermitage, apart 400 paces from the monastery, the other side of the copse." "I know it's the other side of the copse," observed Fyodor Pavlovich, "but we don't remember the way. It is a long time since we've been here." "This way, by this gate, and straight across the copse. The copse. Come with me, won't you? I'll show you. I have to go. I'm going myself. This way, this way." They came up of the gate and turned towards the copse. Maximov, a man of 60, ran rather than walked, turning sideways to stare at them all, with an incredible degree of nervous curiosity. His eyes looked starting out of his head. "You see, we have come to the elder upon business of our own," observed Musov severely. "That personage has granted us an audience, so to speak, and so, though we thank you for showing us the way, we cannot ask you to accompany us." "I have been there, I have been already. Un chevalier parfait, a perfect knight." And Maximov snapped his fingers in the air. "Who is a chevalier?" asked Musov. "The elder, the splendid elder, the elder. The honor and glory of the monastery, Zosima. Such an elder." But his incoherent talk was cut short by a very pale, wan-looking monk of medium height, wearing a monk's cap, who overtook them. Fyodor Pavlovich and Musov stopped. The monk, with an extremely courteous, profound bow, announced, "The Father Superior invites all of you gentlemen to dine with him after your visit to the hermitage, at 1 o'clock, not later. And you also," he added, addressing Maximov. "That I certainly will, without fail," cried Fyodor Pavlovich, hugely delighted at the invitation. "And, believe me, we've all given our word to behave properly here. And you, Pyotr Alexandrovich, will you go too?" "Yes, of course. What have I come for but to study all the customs here? The only obstacle to me is your company." "Yes, Dmitri Fyodorovich is non-existent as yet. It would be a capital thing if he didn't turn up. Do you suppose I like all this business, and in your company too? So we will come to dinner. Thank the Father Superior," he said to the monk. "No, it is my duty now to conduct you to the elder," answered the monk. "If so, I'll go straight to the Father Superior, to the Father Superior," babbled Maximov. "The Father Superior is engaged just now, but as you please." The monk hesitated. "Impertinent old man," Musov observed aloud, while Maximov ran back to the monastery. "He's like von Sohn," Fyodor Pavlovich said suddenly. "Is that all you can think of? In what way is he like von Sohn? Have you ever seen von Sohn?" "I've seen his portrait. It's not the features, but something indefinable. He's the second von Sohn. I can always tell from the physiognomy." "Ah, I dare say you are a connoisseur in that. But look here, Fyodor Pavlovich, you said just now that we had given our word to behave properly. Remember it. I advise you to control yourself. But if you begin to play the fool, I don't intend to be associated with you here. You see what a man he is." He turned to the monk. "I'm afraid to go among decent people with him." A fine smile, not without a certain slightness, came on to the pale, bloodless lips of the monk, but he made no reply, and was evidently silent from a sense of his own dignity. Musov frowned more than ever. "Oh, devil take them all! An outer show elaborated through centuries, and nothing but charlatanism and nonsense underneath," flashed through Musov's mind. "Here's the hermitage. We've arrived," cried Fyodor Pavlovich. "The gates are shut." And he repeatedly made the sign of the cross to the saints painted above and on the sides of the gates. "When you go to Rome, you must do as the Romans do. Here in this hermitage there are 25 saints being saved. They look at one another, they eat cabbages, and not one woman goes in at this gate. That's what is remarkable, and that really is so. But I did hear that the elder receives ladies," he remarked suddenly to the monk. "Women of the people are here too now, lying in the portico there waiting. But for ladies of higher rank, 2 rooms have been built adjoining the portico. But outside the precincts you can see the windows, and the elder goes out to them by an inner passage when he is well enough. They are always outside the precincts. There is a Kharkov lady, Madame Khokhlakov, waiting there now with her sick daughter. Probably he has promised to come out to her, though of late he has been so weak that he has hardly shown himself even to the people. So then there are loopholes, after all, to creep out of the hermitage to the ladies. Don't suppose, Holy Father, that I mean any harm. But do you know that at Athos not only the visitors of women are not allowed, but no creature of the female sex, no hens, nor turkey hens, nor cows? Fyodor Pavlovich, I warn you I shall go back and leave you here. They'll turn you out when I'm gone." "But I'm not interfering with you, Fyodor Alexandrovich. Look," he cried suddenly, stepping within the precincts. "What a vale of roses they live in." Though there were no roses now, there were numbers of rare and beautiful autumn flowers growing wherever there was space for them, and evidently tended by a skillful hand. There were flower beds round the church and between the tombs, and the one-storied wooden house where the elder lived was also surrounded with flowers. And was it like this in the time of the last elder, Fyodor? He didn't care for such elegance. They say he used to jump up and thrash even ladies with a stick, observed Fyodor Pavlovich as he went up the steps. The elder Fyodor did sometimes seem rather strange, but a great deal that's told is foolishness. He never thrashed anyone, answered the mother. Now, gentlemen, if you will wait a minute, I will announce you. Fyodor Pavlovich, for the last time, your compact, do you hear? Behave properly or I will pay you out. Miusov had time to mutter again. I can't think why you're so agitated, Fyodor Pavlovich observed sarcastically. Are you uneasy about your sins? They say he can tell by one's eyes what one has come about, and what a lot you think of their opinion. You, a Parisian, and so advanced. I'm surprised at you. But Miusov had no time to reply to this sarcasm. They were asked to come in. He walked in, somewhat irritated. Now I know myself. I'm annoyed. I shall lose my temper and begin to quarrel, and lower myself in my ideas, he reflected.
Chapter 2. The Old Buffoon.
They entered the room almost at the same moment that the elder came in from his bedroom. There were already in the cell, awaiting the elder, 2 monks of the hermitage, one the father librarian and the other Father Pacey, a very learned man, so they said, in delicate health, though not old. There was also a tall young man, who looked about 22, standing in a corner throughout the interview. He had a broad, fresh face, and clever, observant, narrow brown eyes, and was wearing ordinary dress. He was a divinity student, living under the protection of the monastery. His expression was one of unquestioning, but self-respecting, reverence. Being in a subordinate and dependent position, and so not on an equality with the guests, he did not greet them with a bow. Father Zosimir was accompanied by a novice and by Alyosha. The 2 monks rose and greeted him with a very deep bow, touching the ground with their fingers, then kissed his hand. Blessing them, the elder replied with as deep a reverence to them, and asked their blessing. The whole ceremony was performed very seriously and with an appearance of feeling, not like an everyday rite. But Miusov fancied that it was all done with intentional impressiveness. He stood in front of the other visitors. He had reflected upon it the evening before, from simple politeness, since it was the custom here, to have gone up to receive the elder's blessing, even if he did not kiss his hand. But when he saw all this bowing and kissing on the part of the monks, he instantly changed his mind. With dignified gravity, he made a rather deep, conventional bow, and moved away to a chair. Fyodor Pavlovich did the same, mimicking Miusov like an ape. Ivan bowed with great dignity and courtesy, but he too kept his hands at his sides, while Kalganov was so confused that he did not bow at all. The elder let fall the hand raised to bless them, and bowing to them again, asked them all to sit down. The blood rushed to Alyosha's cheeks. He was ashamed. His forebodings were coming true. Father Zosimir sat down on a very old-fashioned mahogany sofa, covered with leather, and made his visitors sit down in a row along the opposite wall on 4 mahogany chairs, covered with shabby black leather. The monks sat, one at the door and the other at the window. The divinity student, the novice, and Alyosha remained standing. The cell was not very large and had a faded look. It contained nothing but the most necessary furniture, of coarse and poor quality. There were 2 pots of flowers in the window, and a number of holy pictures in the corner. Before one huge ancient icon of the Virgin, a lamp was burning. Near it were 2 other holy pictures in shining satins, and next them carved cherubims, china eggs, a Catholic cross of ivory with a Mater Dolorosa embracing it, and several foreign engravings from the great Italian artists of past centuries. Next to these costly and artistic engravings were several of the roughest Russian prints of saints and martyrs, such as are sold for a few farthings at all the fairs. On the other walls were portraits of Russian bishops, past and present. Musov took a cursory glance at all these conventional surroundings and bent an intent look upon the elder. He had a high opinion of his own insight, a weakness excusable in him as he was 50, an age at which a clever man of the world of established precision can hardly help taking himself rather seriously. At the first moment he did not like Zosima. There was indeed something in the elder's face which many people besides Musov might not have liked. He was a short, bent little man, with very weak legs, and though he was only 65, he looked at least 10 years older. His face was very thin and covered with a network of fine wrinkles, particularly numerous about his eyes, which were small, light-colored, quick, and shining like two bright points. He had a sprinkling of grey hair about his temples. His pointed beard was small and scanty, and his lips, which smiled frequently, were as thin as two threads. His nose was not long, but sharp like a bird's beak. To all appearances a malicious soul, full of petty pride, thought Musov. He felt together dissatisfied with his position. A cheap little clock on the wall struck 12 hurriedly, and served to begin the conversation. "Precisely to our time," cried Fyodor Pavlovich. "But no sign of my son Dmitri. I apologize for him, sacred elder. I am always punctual myself, minute for minute, remembering that punctuality is the courtesy of kings." "But you are not a king anyway," Musov muttered, losing his self-restraint at once. "Yes, that's true, I'm not a king. And would you believe it, Pyotr Alexandrovich, I was aware of that myself. But there, I always say the wrong thing. Your reference," he cried, with sudden pathos. "You behold before you a buffoon in earnest. I introduce myself as such. It's an old habit, alas. And if I sometimes talk nonsense out of place, it's with the object of amusing people and making myself agreeable. One must be agreeable, mustn't one? I was 7 years ago in a little town where I had business, and I made friends with some merchants there. We went to the captain of police because we had to see him about something, and to ask him to dine with us. He was a tall, fat, fair, sulky man, the most dangerous type in such cases. It's their liver. I went straight up to him, and with the ease of a man of the world, you know. 'Mr. Ispravnik,' said I, 'be a napravnik.' 'What do you mean by napravnik?' said he. I saw at the first half-second that it had missed fire. He stood there so glum. 'I wanted to make a joke,' said I, 'for the general diversion, as Mr. Napravnik is a well-known Russian orchestra conductor, and what we need for the harmony of our undertaking is someone of that sort.' And I explained my comparison very reasonably, didn't I? 'Excuse me,' said he, 'I am an Ispravnik, and I do not allow puns to be made on my calling.' He turned and walked away. I followed him, shouting, 'Yes, you are an Ispravnik, not a Napravnik.' 'No,' he said, 'since you called me a Napravnik, I am one. And would you believe it, it ruined our business. And I'm always like that, always injuring myself with my politeness. Once, many years ago, I said to an influential person, 'Your wife is a ticklish lady, in an honorable sense, of the moral quality, so to speak.' But he asked me, 'Why, have you tickled her?' I thought I'd be polite, so I couldn't help saying yes, and he gave me a fine tickling on the spot. Only that happened long ago, so I'm not ashamed to tell the story. I'm always injuring myself like that." "You are doing it now," muttered Musov, with disgust. Father Zosima scrutinized them both in silence. "Am I? Would you believe it? I was aware of that, too, Pyotr Alexandrovich, and let me tell you, indeed, I foresaw I should as soon as I began to speak. And do you know I foresaw, too, that you'd be the first to remark on it. The minute I see my joke isn't coming off, your reference, both my cheeks feel as though they were drawn down to the lower jaw, and there is almost a spasm in them. There's been so since I was young, when I had to make jokes for my living in noblemen's families. I am an inveterate buffoon, and have been from birth up, your reference. It's as though it were a craze in me. I dare say it's a devil within me, but only a little one. A more serious one would have chosen another lodging. But not your soul, Pyotr Alexandrovich. You are not a lodging worth having either. But I believe in God, though I have had doubts of late. But now I sit and await words of wisdom. I am like the philosopher, Diderot, your reference. Did you ever hear, most holy father, how Diderot went to see the Metropolitan Platon in the time of the Empress Catherine? He went in and said straight out, "There is no God," to which the great bishop lifted up his finger and answered, "The fool hath said in his heart there is no God." And he fell down at his feet on the spot. "I believe," he cried, "and will be christened." And so he was. Princess Dashkov was his godmother, and Potoyamkin his godfather. "Fyodor Pavlovich, this is unbearable. You know you're telling lies, and that stupid anecdote isn't true. Why are you playing the fool?" cried Yusuf in a shaking voice. "I suspected all my life that it wasn't true," Fyodor Pavlovich cried with conviction. "But I'll tell you the whole truth, gentlemen. Great elder, forgive me. The last thing about Diderot's christening I made up just now. I never thought of it before. I made it up to add piquancy. I played the fool, Pyotr Alexandrovich, to make myself agreeable, though I really don't know myself sometimes what I do it for. And as for Diderot, I heard as far as 'the fool hath said in his heart' 20 times from the gentry about here when I was young. I heard your aunt, Pyotr Alexandrovich, tell the story. They all believe to this day that the infidel Diderot came to dispute about God with the Metropolitan Platon." Yusuf got up, forgetting himself in his impatience. He was furious and conscious of being ridiculous. What was taking place in the cell was really incredible. For 40 or 50 years past, from the times of former elders, no visitors had entered that cell without feelings of the profoundest veneration. Almost everyone admitted to the cell felt that a great favor was being shown him. Many remained kneeling during the whole visit. Of those visitors, many had been men of high rank and learning, some even free thinkers, attracted by curiosity, but all without exception had shown the profoundest reverence and delicacy. For here there was no question of money, but only on the one side love and kindness, and on the other penitence and eager to decide some spiritual problem or crisis, so that such buffoonery amazed and bewildered the spectators, or at least some of them. The monks, with unchanged countenances, waited, with earnest attention, to hear what the elder would say, but seemed on the point of standing up, like Yusuf. Alyosha stood, with hanging head, on the verge of tears. What seemed to him strangest of all was that his brother Ivan, on whom alone he had rested his hopes, and who alone had such influence on his father that he could have stopped him, sat now quite unmoved, with downcast eyes, apparently waiting with interest to see how it would end, as though he had nothing to do with it. Alyosha did not dare to look at Ratikin, the divinity student, whom he knew almost intimately. He alone in the monastery knew Ratikin's thoughts. "Forgive me," began Yusuf, addressing Father Sosin, "for perhaps I seem to be taking part in this shameful foolery. I made a mistake in believing that even a man like Fyodor Pavlovich would understand what was due on a visit to so honored a personage. I did not suppose I should have to apologize simply for having come with him." Fyodor Alexandrovich could say no more, and was about to leave the room, overwhelmed with confusion. "Don't distress yourself, I beg." The elder got on to his feeble legs, and taking Pyotr Alexandrovich by both hands, made him sit down again. "I beg you not to disturb yourself, particularly beg you to be my guest." And with a bow he went back and sat down again on his little sofa. "Great elder, speak. Do I annoy you by my vivacity?" Fyodor Pavlovich cried suddenly, clutching the arms of his chair in both hands, as though ready to leap up from it if the answer were unfavorable. "I earnestly beg you, too, not to disturb yourself and not to be uneasy," the elder said impressively. "Do not trouble. Make yourself quite at home, and above all, do not be so ashamed of yourself, for that is at the root of it all. Quite at home, to be my natural self. Oh, that is much too much, but I accept it with grateful joy. Do you know, blessed Father, you'd better not invite me to be my natural self. Don't risk it. I will not go so far as that myself. I warn you for your own sake. Well, the rest is still plunged in the mists of uncertainty, though there are people who'd be pleased to describe me for you. I mean that for you, Pyotr Alexandrovich, but as for you, holy being, let me tell you, I am brimming over with ecstasy." He got up, and throwing up his hands, declaimed, "Blessed be the womb that bare thee, and the paps that gave thee suck. the paps especially. When you said just now, don't be so ashamed of yourself, for that is at the root of it all. You pierced right through me by that remark, and read me to the core. Indeed, I always feel when I meet people that I'm lower than all, and that they all take me for a buffoon. So I say, let me really play the buffoon. I'm not afraid of your opinion, for you are every one of you worse than I am. That is why I am a buffoon. It is from shame, great elder, from shame. It's simply oversensitiveness that makes me rowdy. If I had only been sure that everyone would accept me as the kindest and wisest of men, oh Lord, what a good man I should have been then. Teacher, he fell suddenly on his knees, what must I do to gain eternal life? It was difficult even now to decide whether he was joking or really moved. Father Zosima, lifting his eyes, looked at him and said with a smile, you have known for a long time what you must do. You have sense enough. Don't give way to drunkenness and incontinence of speech. Don't give way to sensual lust, and above all, to the love of money. And close your taverns. If you can't close all, at least 2 or 3. And above all, don't lie. You mean about Diderot? No, not about Diderot. Above all, don't lie to yourself. The man who lies to himself and listens to his own lie comes to such a pass that he cannot distinguish the truth within him or around him, and so loses all respect for himself and for others. And having no respect, he ceases to love, and in order to occupy and distract himself without love, he gives way to passions and coarse pleasures, and sinks to bestiality in his vices, all from continual lying to other men and to himself. The man who lies to himself can be more easily offended than anyone. You know it is sometimes very pleasant to take offense, isn't it? A man may know that nobody has insulted him, but that he has invented the insult for himself, has lied and exaggerated to make it picturesque, has caught at a word and made a mountain out of a molehill. He knows that himself, yet he will be the first to take offense, and will revel in his resentment till he feels great pleasure in it, and so pass to genuine vindictiveness. But get up, sit down, I beg you. All this, too, is deceitful posturing. Blessed man, give me your hand to kiss. Fyodor Pavlovich skipped up and imprinted a rapid kiss on the elder's thin hand. It is pleasure to take offense. You said that so well, as I never heard it before. Yes, I have been all my life taking offense, to please myself, taking offense on aesthetic grounds, for it is not so much pleasant as distinguished sometimes to be insulted. That you have forgotten, great elder, it is distinguished. I shall make a note of that. But I have been lying positively my whole life long, every day and hour of it. Of a truth, I am a lie, and the father of lies. Though I believe I am not the father of lies, I am getting mixed in my texts. Say the son of lies, and that will be enough. Only, my angel, I may sometimes talk about Diderot. Diderot will do no harm, though sometimes a word will do harm. Great elder, by the way, I was forgetting, though I had been meaning for the last 2 years to come here on purpose to ask and to find out something. Only do tell Pyotr Alexandrovich not to interrupt me. Here is my question. Is it true, great father, that the story is told somewhere in the lives of the saints of a holy saint martyred for his faith who, when his head was cut off at last, stood up, picked up his head and, courteously kissing it, walked a long way, carrying it in his hands? Is that true or not, honored father? No, it is untrue, said the elder. There is nothing of the kind in all the lives of the saints. What saint do you say the story is told of? Asked the father librarian. I do not know what saint. I do not know, and can't tell. I was deceived. I was told the story. I had heard it, and do you know who told it? Pyotr Alexandrovich Musov here, who was so angry just now about Diderot. He it was who told the story. I have never told it to you. I never speak to you at all. It is true you did not tell me, but you told it when I was present. It was 3 years ago. I mentioned it because by that ridiculous story you shook my faith, Pyotr Alexandrovich. You knew nothing of it. But I went home with my faith shaken, and I have been getting more and more shaken ever since. Yes, Pyotr Alexandrovich, you were the cause of a great fall. That was not a Diderot. Fyodor Pavlovich got excited and pathetic. though it was perfectly clear to everyone by now that he was playing a part again. Yet Yusuf was stunned by his words. "What nonsense! And it is all nonsense," he muttered. "I may really have told it, some time or other, but not to you. I was told it myself. I heard it in Paris from a Frenchman. He told me it was read at our Mass from the lives of the saints. He was a very learned man who had made a special study of Russian statistics and had lived a long time in Russia. I have not read the lives of the saints myself, and I'm not going to read them. All sorts of things are said at dinner. We were dining there." "Yes, we were dining there, and so I lost my faith," said Fyodor Pavlovich, mimicking him. "What do I care for your faith?" Yusuf was on the point of shouting, but he suddenly checked himself and said with contempt, "You defile everything you touch." The elder suddenly rose from his seat. "Excuse me, gentlemen, for leaving you a few minutes," he said, addressing all his guests. "I have visitors awaiting me who arrived before me, but don't you tell lies all the same," he added, turning to Fyodor Pavlovich with a good-humored face. He went out of the cell. Alyosha and the novice flew to escort him down the steps. Alyosha was breathless. He was glad to get away, but he was glad too that the elder was good-humored and not offended. Father Zosima was going towards the portico to bless the people waiting for him there, but Fyodor Pavlovich persisted in stopping him at the door of the cell. "Blessed man," he cried with feeling, "allow me to kiss your hand once more. Yes, with you I could still talk, I could still get on. Do you think I always lie and play the fool like this? Believe me, I have been acting like this all the time on purpose to try you. I have been testing you all the time to see whether I could get on with you. Is there room for my humility besides your pride? I'm ready to give you a testimonial that one can get on with you. But now I'll be quiet. I will keep quiet all the same. I'll sit in a chair and hold my tongue. Now it is for you to speak, Pyotr Alexandrovich. You are the principal person left now, for 10 minutes.
Chapter 3. Peasant Women Who Have Faith.
Near the wooden portico below, built on to the outer wall of the precinct, there was a crowd of about 20 peasant women. They had been told that the elder was at last coming out, and they had gathered together in anticipation. Two ladies, Madame Khokhlakov and her daughter, had also come out into the portico to wait for the elder, but in a separate part of it set aside for women of rank. Madame Khokhlakov was a wealthy lady, still young and attractive, and always dressed with taste. She was rather pale, and had lively black eyes. She was not more than 33, and had been 5 years a widow. Her daughter, a girl of 14, was partially paralyzed. The poor child had not been able to walk for the last 6 months, and was wheeled about in a long reclining chair. She had a charming little face, rather thin from illness, but full of gaiety. There was a gleam of mischief in her big dark eyes with their long lashes. Her mother had been intending to take her abroad ever since the spring, but they had been detained all the summer by business connected with their estate. They had been staying a week in our town, where they had come more for purposes of business than devotion, but had visited Father Zosima once already, 3 days before. Though they knew that the elder scarcely saw anyone, they had now suddenly turned up again, and urgently entreated the happiness of looking once again on the great healer. The mother was sitting on a chair by the side of her daughter's invalid carriage, and 2 paces from her stood an old monk, not one of our monastery, but a visitor from an obscure religious house in the far north. He too sought the elder's blessing. But Father Zosima, on entering the portico, went first straight to the peasants who were crowded at the foot of the 3 steps that led up into the portico. Father Zosima stood on the top step, put on his stole, and began blessing the women who thronged about him. One crazy woman was led up to him. As soon as she caught sight of the elder, she began shrieking and writhing as though in the pains of childbirth. Laying the stole on her forehead, he read a short prayer over her, and she was at once soothed and quieted. I do not know how it may be now, but in my childhood I often happened to see and hear these possessed women in the villages and monasteries. They used to be brought to Mass. They would squeal and bark like a dog so that they were heard all over the church. But when the sacrament was carried in and they were led up to it, at once the procession ceased, and the sick women were always soothed for a time. I was greatly impressed and amazed at this as a child. But then I heard from country neighbors and from my town teachers that the whole illness was simulated to avoid work, and that it could always be cured by suitable severity. Various anecdotes were told to confirm this. But later on I learned with astonishment from medical specialists that there is no pretense about it, that it is a terrible illness to which women are subject, especially prevalent among us in Russia, and that it is due to the hard lot of the peasant women. It is a disease, I was told, arising from exhausting toil too soon after hard, abnormal, and unassisted labor in childbirth, and from the hopeless misery, from beatings, and so on, which some women were not able to endure like others. The strange and instant healing of the frantic and struggling woman as soon as she was led up to the Holy Sacrament, which had been explained to me as due to malingering and the trickery of the clericals, arose probably in the most natural manner. Both the women who supported her and the invalid herself fully believed as a truth beyond question that the evil spirit in possession of her could not hold out if the sick woman were brought to the sacrament and made to bow down before it. And so, with a nervous and physically deranged woman, a sort of convulsion of the whole organism always took place, and was bound to take place, at the moment of bowing down to the sacrament, aroused by the expectation of the miracle of healing and the implicit belief that it would come to pass. And it did come to pass, though only for a moment. It was exactly the same now as soon as the elder touched the sick woman with the stole. Many of the women in the crowd were moved to tears of ecstasy by the effect of the moment. Some strove to kiss the hem of his garment, others cried out in sing-song voices. He blessed them all and talked with some of them. The possessed woman he knew already. He came from a village only 6 versts from the monastery, and had been brought to him before. But here is one from afar. He pointed to a woman by no means old, but very thin and wasted, with a face not merely sunburned, but almost blackened by exposure. She was kneeling and gazing with a fixed stare at the elder. There was something almost frenzied in her eyes. "From afar off, father, from afar off. From 200 miles from here, from afar off, father, from afar off." The woman began in a sing-song voice as though she were chanting a dirge, swaying her head from side to side with her cheek resting in her hand. There is silent and long-suffering sorrow to be met with among the peasantry. It withdraws into itself and is still. But there is a grief that breaks out, and from that minute it bursts into tears and finds vent in wailing. This is particularly common with women, but it is no lighter a grief than the silent. Lamentations comfort only by lacerating the heart still more. Such grief does not desire consolation. It feeds on the sense of its hopelessness. Lamentations spring only from the constant craving to reopen the wound. "You are of the tradesman class," said Father Zosima, looking curiously at her. "Townfolk we are, father, townfolk. Yet we are peasants though we live in the town. I have come to see you, O father. We heard of you, father, we heard of you. I have buried my little son, and I have come on a pilgrimage. I have been in 3 monasteries, but they told me, 'Go, Natasha, go to them.' That is to you. I have come. I was yesterday at the service, and today I have come to you." "What are you weeping for?" "It's my little son I'm grieving for, father. He was 3 years old. 3 years old but 3 months. For my little boy, father, I'm in anguish. For my little boy. He was the last one left. We had 4, my Nikita and I, and now we've no children. Our dear ones have all gone. I buried the first 3 without grieving over much, and now I have buried the last. I can't forget him. He seems always standing before me. He never leaves me. He has withered my heart. I looked at his little clothes, his little shirt, his little boots, and I wail. I lay out all that is left of him, all his little things. I look at them and wail. I say to Nikita, 'My husband, let me go on the pilgrimage, master.' He is a driver. We're not poor people, Father, not poor. He drives our own horse. It's all our own, the horse and the carriage. And what good is it all to us now? My Nikita has begun drinking while I'm away. He's sure to. It used to be so before. As soon as I turn my back, he gives way to it. But now I don't think about him. It's 3 months since I left home. I've forgotten him. I've forgotten everything. I don't want to remember. And what would our life be now together? I've done with him. I've done with them all. I don't care to look upon my house and my goods. I don't care to see anything at all. Listen, mother, said the elder. Once in olden times a holy saint saw in the temple a mother like you weeping for her little one, her only one, whom God had taken. Knowest thou not, said the saint to her, how bold these little ones are before the throne of God? Verily there are none bolder than they in the kingdom of heaven. Thou didst give us life, O Lord, they say, and scarcely had we looked upon it when thou didst take it back again. And so boldly they ask and ask again that God gives them at once the rank of angels. Therefore, said the saint, thou too, O mother, rejoice and weep not, for thy little son is with the Lord in the fellowship of the angels. That's what the saint said to the weeping mother of old. He was a great saint, and he could not have spoken falsely. Therefore you too, mother, know that your little one is surely before the throne of God, is rejoicing and happy, and praying to God for you, and therefore weep not, but rejoice. The woman listened to him. Looking down with her cheek in her hand, she sighed deeply. My Nikita tried to comfort me with the same words as you. Foolish one, he said, why weep? Our son is no doubt singing with the angels before God. He says that to me, but he weeps himself. I see that he cries like me. I know, Nikita, said I. Where could he be if not with the Lord God? Only, here with us now, he is not as he used to sit beside us before. And if only I could look upon him one little time, if only I could peep at him one little time, without going up to him, without speaking, if I could be hidden in a corner and only see him for one little minute, hear him playing in the yard, calling in his little voice, Mammy, where are you? If only I could hear him pattering with his little feet about the room just once, only once. For so often I remember how he used to run to me and shout and laugh. If only I could hear his little feet, I should know him. But he's gone, Father, he's gone. And I shall never hear him again. Here's his little sash, but him I shall never see or hear now. She drew out of her bosom her boy's little embroidered sash, and as soon as she looked at it, she began shaking with sobs, hiding her eyes with her fingers, through which the tears flowed in a sudden stream. It is Rachel of old, said the elder, weeping for her children, and will not be comforted because they are not. Such is the lot set on earth for you mothers. Be not comforted. Consolation is not what you need. Weep and be not consoled, but weep. Only every time that you weep, be sure to remember that your little son is one of the angels of God, that he looks down from there at you and sees you, and rejoices at your tears, and points at them to the Lord God, and a long while yet will you keep that great mother's grief. But it will turn in the end into quiet joy, and your bitter tears will be only tears of tender sorrow that purifies the heart and delivers it from sin. And I shall pray for the peace of your child's soul. What was his name? Alexey, Father. A sweet name. After Alexey, the man of God. Yes, Father. What a saint he was. I will remember him, Mother, and you grieve in my prayers, and I will pray for your husband's health. It is a sin for you to leave him. Your little one will see from heaven that you have forsaken his father, and will weep over you. Why do you trouble his happiness? He is living, for the soul lives forever, and though he is not in the house, he is near you, unseen. How can he go into the house when you say that the house is hateful to you? To whom is he to go if he find you not together, his father and mother? He comes to you in dreams now, and you grieve, but then he will send you gentle dreams. Go to your husband, Mother. Go this very day. I will go, Father, at your word, I will go. You've gone straight to my heart. My Nikita, you are waiting for me. The woman began in a sing-song voice, but the elder had already turned away to a very old woman, dressed like a dweller in the town, not like a pilgrim. Her eyes showed that she had come with an object, and in order to say something. She said she was the widow of a non-commissioned officer and lived close by in the town. Her son Vasenka was in the commissariat service and had gone to Irkutsk in Siberia. He had written twice from there, but now a year had passed since he had written. She did inquire about him, but she did not know the proper place to inquire. Only the other day, Stepanida Ilyinishna, she's a rich merchant's wife, said to me, "You go, Prohorovna, and put your son's name down for a prayer in the church, and pray for the peace of his soul as though he were dead. His soul will be troubled," she said, "and he will write you a letter." And Stepanida Ilyinishna told me it was a certain thing which had been many times tried. Only I am in doubt. Oh, you light of ours, is it true or false, and would it be right? Don't think of it. It's shameful to ask the question. How is it possible to pray for the peace of a living soul? And his own mother too? It's a great sin, akin to sorcery. Only for your ignorance it is forgiven you. Better pray to the Queen of Heaven, our swift defense and help, for his good health, and that she may forgive you for your error. And another thing I will tell you, Prohorovna, either he will soon come back to you, your son, or he will be sure to send a letter. Go, and henceforward be in peace. Your son is alive, I tell you. Dear father, God reward you, our benefactor, who prays for all of us and for our sins. But the elder had already noticed in the crowd 2 glowing eyes fixed upon him. An exhausted, consumptive-looking, though young peasant woman was gazing at him in silence. Her eyes besought him, but she seemed afraid to approach. "What is it, my child?" "Absolve my soul, father," she articulated softly, and slowly sank on her knees and bowed down at his feet. "I have sinned, father. I am afraid of my sin." The elder sat down on the lower step. The woman crept closer to him, still on her knees. "I am a widow these 3 years," she began in a half-whisper, with a sort of shudder. "I had a hard life with my husband. He was an old man. He used to beat me cruelly. He lay ill. I thought, looking at him, if he were to get well, if he were to get up again, what then? And then the thought came to me." "Stay," said the elder, and he put his ear close to her lips. The woman went on in a low whisper, so that it was almost impossible to catch anything. She had soon done. 3 years ago?" asked the elder. 3 years. At first I didn't think about it, but now I've begun to be ill, and the thought never leaves me." "Have you come from far?" "Over 300 miles away." "Have you told it in confession?" "I have confessed it. Twice I have confessed it." "Have you been admitted to communion?" "Yes, I'm afraid. I'm afraid to die." "Fear nothing and never be afraid, and don't fret. If only your penitence fail not, God will forgive all. There is no sin, and there can be no sin on all the earth, which the Lord will not forgive to the truly repentant. Man cannot commit a sin so great as to exhaust the infinite love of God. Can there be a sin which could exceed the love of God? Think only of repentance, continual repentance, but dismiss fear altogether. Believe that God loves you as you cannot conceive, that he loves you with your sin in your sin. It has been said of old that over one repentant sinner there is more joy in heaven than over 10 righteous men. Go and fear not. Be not bitter against men. Be not angry if you are wronged. Forgive the dead man in your hearts what wrong he did you. Be reconciled with him in truth. If you are penitent, you love. And if you love, you are of God. All things are atoned for. All things are saved by love. If I, a sinner, even as you are, am tender with you and have pity on you, how much more will God? Love is such a priceless treasure that you can redeem the whole world by it, and expiate not only your own sins, but the sins of others. He signed her 3 times with the cross, took from his own neck a little icon and put it upon her. She bowed down to the earth without speaking. He got up and looked cheerfully at a healthy peasant woman with a tiny baby in her arms. "From Vershagoye, dear father. 5 miles you have dragged yourself with the baby. What do you want?" "I've come to look at you. I have been to you before, or have you forgotten? You've no great memory if you've forgotten me. They told us you were ill. Thinks I'll go and see him for myself. Now I see you, and you're not ill. You'll live another 20 years. God bless you. There are plenty to pray for you. How should you be ill?" "I thank you for all, daughter. By the way, I have a thing to ask, not a great one. Here are 60 kopecks. Give them, dear father, to someone poorer than me. I thought as I came along, better give through him. He'll know whom to give to. Thanks, my dear, thanks. You're a good woman. I love you. I'll do so certainly. Is that your little girl? My little girl, father, Lizaveta. May the Lord bless you both, you and your babe, Lizaveta. You have gladdened my heart, mother. Farewell, dear children. Farewell, dear ones. He blessed them all and bowed low to them.
Chapter 4. A Lady of Little Faith.
The visitor, looking on the scene of his conversation with the peasants and his blessing them, shed silent tears and wiped them away with her handkerchief. She was a sentimental society lady of genuinely good disposition in many respects. When the elder went up to her at last, she met him enthusiastically. "Ah, what I have been feeling, looking on at this touching scene." She could not go on for emotion. "Oh, I understand the people's love for you. I love the people myself. I want to love them. And who could help loving them, our splendid Russian people, so simple in their greatness? How is your daughter's health? You wanted to talk to me again?" "Oh, I have been urgently begging for it. I have prayed for it. I was ready to fall on my knees and kneel for 3 days at your windows until you let me in. We have come, great healer, to express our ardent gratitude. You have healed my Lise, healed her completely, merely by praying over her last Thursday and laying your hands upon her. We have hastened here to kiss those hands, to pour out our feelings and our homage." "What do you mean by healed? But she is still lying down in her chair." "But her night fevers have entirely ceased ever since Thursday," said the lady with nervous haste. "And that's not all. Her legs are stronger. This morning she got up well. She had slept all night. Look at her rosy cheeks, her bright eyes. She used to be always crying, but now she laughs and is gay and happy. This morning she insisted on my letting her stand up, and she stood up for a whole minute without any support. She wagers that in a fortnight she will be dancing in a quadrille. I've called in Dr. Herzenstein. He shrugged his shoulders and said, 'I am amazed. I can make nothing of it. And would you have us not come here to disturb you, not fly here to thank you?' Lise, thank him, thank him." Lisa's pretty little laughing face became suddenly serious. She rose in her chair as far as she could and, looking at the elder, clasped her hands before him, but could not restrain herself and broke into laughter. "It's at him," she said, pointing to Alyosha, with childish vexation at herself for not being able to repress her mirth. If anyone had looked at Alyosha standing a step behind the elder, he would have caught a quick flush crimsoning his cheeks in an instant. His eyes shone and he looked down. "She has a message for you, Alexey Fyodorovich. How are you?" The mother went on, holding out her exquisitely gloved hand to Alyosha. The elder turned round and all at once looked attentively at Alyosha. The latter went nearer to Lise and, smiling in a strangely awkward way, held out his hand to her too. Lise assumed an important air. "Katerina Ivanovna has sent you this through me." She handed him a little note. "She particularly begs you to go and see her as soon as possible, that you will not fail her, but will be sure to come." "She asks me to go and see her? Me? What for?" Alyosha muttered in great astonishment. His face at once looked anxious. "Oh, it's all to do with Dmitri Fyodorovich and what has happened lately," the mother explained hurriedly. "Katerina Ivanovna has made up her mind, but she must see you about it. Why, of course, I can't say, but she wants to see you at once. And you will go to her, of course. It is a Christian duty." "I have only seen her once," Alyosha protested with the same perplexity. "Oh, she's such a lofty, incomparable creature. If only for her suffering. Think what she has gone through, what she is enduring now. Think what awaits her. It's all terrible, terrible." "Very well, I will come," Alyosha decided, after rapidly scanning the brief, enigmatic note, which consisted of an urgent entreaty that he would come, without any sort of explanation. Oh, how sweet and generous that would be of you, cried Lise with sudden animation. I told Mamma you'd sure not to go. I said you were saving your soul. How splendid you are. I've always thought you were splendid. How glad I am to tell you so. Lise, said her mother impressively, though she smiled after she had said it. You have quite forgotten us, Alexey Fyodorovich, she said. You never come to see us. Yet Lise had told me twice that she is never happy except with you. Alyosha raised his downcast eyes and again flushed, and again smiled without knowing why. But the elder was no longer watching him. He had begun talking to a monk who, as mentioned before, had been awaiting his entrance by Lise's chair. He was evidently a monk of the humblest, that is, of the peasant class, of a narrow outlook, but a true believer, and in his own way a stubborn one. He announced that he had come from the far north, from Obdorsk, from St. Sylvester, and was a member of a poor monastery, consisting of only 10 monks. The elder gave him his blessing and invited him to come to his cell whenever he liked. How can you presume to do such deeds? The monk asked suddenly, pointing solemnly and significantly at Lise. He was referring to her healing. It's too early, of course, to speak of that. Relief is not complete cure, and may proceed from different causes. But if there has been any healing, it is by no power but God's will. It's all from God. Visit me, Father, he added to the monk. It's not often I can see visitors. I'm ill, and I know that my days are numbered. Oh, no, no! God will not take you from us. You will live a long, long time yet, cried the lady. And in what way are you ill? You look so well, so gay and happy. I am extraordinarily better today, but I know that it's only for a moment. I understand my disease now thoroughly. If I seem so happy to you, you could never say anything that would please me so much. For men are made for happiness, and anyone who is completely happy has a right to say to himself, I am doing God's will on earth. All the righteous, all the saints, all the holy martyrs were happy. Oh, how you speak! What bold and lofty words! Cried the lady. You seem to pierce with your words, and yet happiness, happiness, where is it? Who can say of himself that he is happy? Oh, since you have been so good as to let us see you once more today, let me tell you what I could not utter last time, what I dared not say. Oh, I'm suffering and have been for so long. I'm suffering. Forgive me. I am suffering. And in the rush of fervent feeling, she clasped her hands before him. From what specially? I suffer from lack of faith. Lack of faith in God? No, no, no. I dare not even think of that. But the future life, it is such an enigma, and no one can solve it. Listen, you are a healer. You are deeply versed in the human soul, and of course I dare not expect you to believe me entirely, but I assure you on my word of honor that I am not speaking lightly now. The thought of the life beyond the grave distracts me to anguish, to terror, and I don't know to whom to appeal, and have not dared to all my life. And now I am so bold as to ask you, oh God, what will you think of me now? She clasped her hands. Don't distress yourself about my opinion of you, said the elder. I quite believe in the sincerity of your suffering. Oh, how thankful I am to you. You see, I shut my eyes and ask myself if everyone has faith. Where did it come from? And then they do say that it all comes from terror at the menacing phenomena of nature, and that none of it's real. And I say to myself, what if I've been believing all my life, and when I come to die, there's nothing but the burdocks growing on my grave, as I read in some author. It's awful. How can I get back my faith? But I only believed when I was a little child, mechanically, without thinking of anything. How is one to prove it? I have come now to lay my soul before you and to ask you about it. If I let this chance slip, no one all my life will answer me. How can I prove it? How can I convince myself? Oh, how unhappy I am. I stand and look about me and see that scarcely anyone else cares. No one troubles his head about it, and I am the only one who can't stand it. It's deadly, deadly. No doubt, but there's no proving it, though you can be convinced of it. How? By the experience of acting love. Strive to love your neighbor actively and indefatigably. In as far as you advance in love, you will grow surer of the reality of God and of the immortality of your soul. If you attain the perfect self-forgetfulness in the love of your neighbor, then you will believe without doubt, and no doubt can possibly enter your soul. This has been tried, this is certain. In acting love, there's another question, and such a question. You see, I so love humanity that, would you believe it, I often dream of forsaking all that I have, leaving Lise, and becoming a sister of mercy. I close my eyes and think and dream, and at that moment I feel full of strength to overcome all obstacles. No wounds, no festering sores could at that moment frighten me. I would bind them up and wash them with my own hands. I would nurse the afflicted. I would be ready to kiss such wounds. It is much, and well that your mind is full of such dreams and not others. Sometimes, unawares, you may do a good deed in reality. Yes, but could I endure such a life for long? The lady went on fervently, almost frantically. That's the chief question. That's my most agonizing question. I shut my eyes and ask myself, would you persevere long on that path? And if the patient whose wounds you are washing did not meet you with gratitude, but worried you with his whims, without valuing or remarking your charitable services, began abusing you and rudely commanding you, and complaining to the superior authorities of you, what then? Would you persevere in your love or not? And do you know, I came with horror to the conclusion that if anything could dissipate my love to humanity, it would be ingratitude. In short, I am a hired servant. I expect my payment at once, that is, praise, and the repayment of love with love. Otherwise, I am incapable of loving anyone. She was in a very paroxysm of self-castigation, and, concluding, she looked with defiant resolution at the elder. It's just the same story as a doctor once told me, observed the elder. He was a man getting on in years, and undoubtedly clever. He spoke as frankly as you, though in jest, a bitter jest. I love humanity, he said, but I wonder at myself. The more I love humanity in general, the less I love man in particular. In my dreams, he said, I have often come to making enthusiastic schemes for the service of humanity, and perhaps I might actually have faced crucifixion if it had been suddenly necessary. And yet I am incapable of living in the same room with anyone for 2 days together, as I know by experience. As soon as anyone is near me, his personality disturbs my self-complacency and restricts my freedom. In 24 hours I begin to hate the best of men, one because he is too long over his dinner, another because he has a cold and keeps on blowing his nose. I become hostile to people the moment they come close to me, but it has always happened that the more I detest men individually, the more ardent becomes my love for humanity. But what's to be done? What can one do in such a case? Must one despair? No, it is enough that you are distressed at it. Do what you can, and it will be reckoned unto you. Much is done already in you, since you can so deeply and sincerely know yourself. If you have been talking to me so sincerely, simply to gain approbation for your frankness, as you did from me just now, then of course you will not attain to anything in the achievement of real love. It will all get no further than dreams, and your whole life will slip away like a phantom. In that case, you will naturally cease to think of the future life too, and will of yourself grow calmer after a fashion in the dead. You have crushed me. Only now, as you speak, I understand that I was really only seeking your approbation for my sincerity when I told you I could not endure ingratitude. You have revealed me to myself. You have seen through me and explained me to myself. Are you speaking the truth? Well, now, after such a confession, I believe that you are sincere and good at heart. If you do not attain happiness, always remember that you are on the right road, and try not to leave it. Above all, avoid falsehood. Every kind of falsehood, especially falseness to yourself. Watch over your own deceitfulness and look into it every hour, every minute. Avoid being scornful, both to others and to yourself. What seems to you bad within you will grow purer from the very fact of your observing it in yourself. Avoid fear too, though fear is only the consequence of every sort of falsehood. Never be frightened at your own faint-heartedness in attaining love. Don't be frightened overmuch even at your evil actions. I'm sorry I can say nothing more console to you, for love in action is a harsh and dreadful thing compared with love in dreams. Love in dreams is greedy for immediate action, rapidly performed and in the sight of all. Men will only give their lives if only the ordeal does not last long but is soon over, with all looking on and applauding as though on the stage. But active love is labor and fortitude, and for some people too, perhaps, a complete science. But I predict that just when you see with horror that in spite of all your efforts, you are getting farther from your goal instead of nearer to it, at that very moment I predict that you will reach it and behold clearly the miraculous power of the Lord, who has been all the time loving and mysteriously guiding you. Forgive me for not being able to stay longer with you. They are waiting for me. Goodbye. The lady was weeping. Lise, Lise, bless her, she cried, starting up suddenly. She does not deserve to be loved. I have seen her naughtiness all along. The elder said jestingly, Why have you been laughing at Alexey? Lise had in fact been occupied in mocking at him all the time. She had noticed before that Alyosha was shy and tried not to look at her, and she found this extremely amusing. She waited intently to catch his eye. Alyosha, unable to endure her persistent stare, was irresistibly and suddenly drawn to glance at her, and at once she smiled triumphantly in his face. Alyosha was even more disconcerted and vexed. At last he turned away from her altogether and hid behind the elder's back. After a few minutes, drawn by the same irresistible force, he turned again to see whether he was being looked at or not, and found Lise almost hanging out of her chair to peep sideways at him, eagerly waiting for him to look. Catching his eye, she laughed so that the elder could not help saying, Why do you make fun of him like that, naughty girl? Lise suddenly and quite unexpectedly blushed. Her eyes flashed and her face became quite serious. She began speaking quickly and nervously in a warm and resentful voice. Why has he forgotten everything then? He used to carry me about when I was little. We used to play together. He used to come to teach me to read. Do you know? 2 years ago, when he went away, he said that he would never forget me, that we were friends forever, forever, forever. And now he's afraid of me all at once. Am I going to eat him? Why doesn't he want to come near me? Why doesn't he talk? Why won't he come and see us? It's not that you won't let him. We know that he goes everywhere. It's not good manners for me to invite him. He ought to have thought of it first, if he hasn't forgotten me. No, now he's saving his soul. Why have you put that long gown on him? If he runs, he'll fall. And suddenly she hid her face in her hand and went off into irresistible, prolonged, nervous, inaudible laughter. The elder listened to her with a smile and blessed her tenderly. As she kissed his hand, she suddenly pressed it to her eyes and began crying. Don't be angry with me. I'm silly and good for nothing. And perhaps Alyosha is right, quite right, in not wanting to come and see such a ridiculous girl. I will certainly send him, said the elder.
Copse. Now, a small group of trees. Charlatanism. Now, the practice of pretending to have knowledge, skills, or abilities that one does not actually possess, typically to deceive others for personal gain. Cherub. Now, a winged angelic being described in biblical tradition as attending on God, represented in ancient Middle Eastern art as a lion or bull with eagle's wings and a human face, and regarded in traditional Christian angelology as an angel of the second highest order of the ninefold celestial hierarchy. Cursory. Adjective, hasty and therefore not thorough or detailed. Infidel. Now, a person who has no religion or whose religion is not that of the majority. Stole. Now, a priest's silk vestment worn over the shoulders and hanging down to the knee or below.